Sam, Sam Goldenberg, who is a mechanic. He has a shop called Goldie's Gears. He's in Oakland, and he very graciously agreed to kick off what we hope to be a quarterly series called Ask a Mechanic. And Sam has put together an outline that starts with really the essential parts of keeping your bike clean, what to look for. He'll talk about flats and other things. I shared, and I don't know if people can see an outline for this evening's presentation. Can people see that to get an idea of what he will be sharing or discussing tonight?
We can see it.
Good.
I can see it.
Terrific. All right. So what I'll probably do is stop the share just so everyone can see that, and then we'll pin Sam to the main speaker, main attraction here, and we will let him take it away. Sam, how about an intro about yourself, some of your background?
Can you all see me here? Is there too much glare up here on my shiny bald head? Hopefully.
Michael, could you unpin so we can see?
Yeah, I just lost it. Hold on a second, please. So let me stop share. Sam. Where'd you go, Sam? Here you are. Pin Sam. All right, here we go. We got Sam there.
Get a little tilt there. Now, we'll have to contend with a little bit of glare from my lights because I do need them to show you what we're doing. But my name is Sam. Nice to meet y'all. Maybe I've seen you out there on Grizzly Peak or somewhere up in these East Bay Hills. So nice to see you tonight. Figure tonight, what we'll do is kind of just get started on the basics. I've been doing this stuff. I got interested in bikes, kind of this going over the same sort of things that we'll start with tonight. I wanted to know more about how to work on my own bicycle and how to maintain it and how to keep myself on the road without going broke. And also just with, I like the idea of the bicycle being a tool that you can sort of go anywhere with under your own power, not only with your own body, but with some basic tools, a little bit of money and a map, and some snacks, maybe a couple of burritos or something. So tonight, what I wanted to talk about were some quick basics, how to keep your bike clean so that when you come see someone like me, it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to replace all of it, how to change a flat tire. I'm sure many of you have done all these things before. I'm just going to go all the way back to the beginning, and I'm going to show you how I like to do it. Maybe you'll find that there's something that I know that you don't, or remind you of something, an old technique that you knew long ago and you forgot, and this will make your life easier. So as we go along, feel free to stop me, ask some questions. I have no problem diverting this talk if something else is just more pertinent for y'all. If I'm going over something that everybody seems to know, or there's some specifics that you'd like to know more about. How many are disc brake people? Any disc brake folks? Yeah, so there will be a bit of, I think tonight I'm not really going to delve too deep into that. I'm going to talk a little bit about brake related stuff, safety in particular, and I'll touch primarily on rim brakes. Maybe for the next seminar, if it goes well enough, we'll talk about disc brakes, being that they are kind of ubiquitous now and in the market and here to stay. So for road bikes or mountain bikes or whatever. Any questions thus far? Well, I'm Sam. Nice to see y'all. Well, let's start with the drivetrain. I might be picking up the computer once in a while and moving it around, but for the most part, you're looking at the non-drive side of the bicycle, and I'm standing on the drive side. Let's see here. So first things first, your chain. Before we even get to cleaning the chain, how many of you have been told your chain is worn, you need a new chain, your chain's blown? If you let it wear so quickly or so much so, you're going to need new cassette, you need new chain rings, you need this, that, and the other. Okay. here's a tool that you might find yourself getting. And I have a few little tools out on my bench here, some of which you're just never going to buy, some of which you might have and maybe not use that often, but not a bad thing to have. This is a chain wear indicator tool. There are several like this one. This one happens to be quite conservative. It's from Park Tool. It is a solid piece of stamped laser cut, maybe steel. And it gives you rather conservative stretch indications. Typically, we use the term stretch. What we really mean, there's no stretch in the sense of like rubber or rubber band or something like that. What we're talking about when we talk about a chain stretching is actually the pins and the rollers of the chain being made up of plates, pins and rollers. Those pins hold the plates and the rollers together, actually wearing. So those pins and rollers wear, and in turn, over 110 links or however many, we get some elongation. So we're not actually talking about stretch in the sense that like your skin is stretchy or a rubber band is stretchy. But in any event, this tool has two ways of measuring your chain. You can drop it in on this side and it's going to tell you this is not a brand new chain, and you can drop it in on the other side and it's going to tell you there's some wear on this chain, you should consider replacing it. There's another tool from Park that looks just like this one. I don't know if you can see this, but there are some numbers over here. Can you just barely make those out? So they say 0.5 and 0.75. On the more conservative tool, it says on the more extreme tool, if you will, 0.75, 1.0. What it's referring to is millimeters, and we're measuring millimeters of wear over a given space of length. So I don't know off the top of my head how many we're talking about here. If I drop it in, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, something like 8 or 9 links. So we're talking about anywhere from half a millimeter to an entire millimeter of distance over the length of say 8 or 9 links. And that's really not a hell of a lot, but it's enough to make a big difference on your drivetrain. So this being the conservative tool, this will tell you when to change your chain sooner than later so that you don't end up having to replace everything all at once. The other tool being a little bit more lenient, let you go a little further. I like to have the conservative one, saves my clients cassettes and chain rings rather than chains, which are kind of the least expensive of those 3 components.
Sam, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I read that the 0.5 was for 11-speed chains and that the 0.75 was for 10-speed chains. Is that not accurate? Is there a different wear indication for one speed chain as opposed to another?
In theory, the distance between the pins should be the same. Was that Charlie there? I couldn't quite see.
Yeah, it's Charlie. Yeah.
In theory, that's why every chain ring, regardless, chain rings and cassettes, that's why the distance between the teeth concentrically is the same. However, the distance between the plates or between the cogs is wider or narrower depending on the speed. So my guess is that's not accurate. I don't know off the top of my head. I'm not sure, but I've been using that tool for 10 years and I've never heard that. Yeah, the difference in the speeds doesn't have to do with the distance between the links so much as how wide or narrow the chain is and the relative chain rings and cassette. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Not sure about that. That said, some chains right out of the box will measure. You'll be able to drop that 0.5 right in there. So this is a very conservative tool, let's say, to put it lightly. So, while I'm on the subject, when you go to your shop or your mechanic and they say, oh, your chains are really worn, we need to replace everything, or at least your cassette or whatever. The reason being, I'll call them 3 components: chain ring, chain, and cassette. They all wear as a unit. So you'll notice that when you put a brand new chain on your worn cassette and or worn chain rings, they will not sync up. They will not have that the same wear patterns, the same elongation. You'll find popping, skipping, etc. So that's why I like to be conservative with the chain tool and replace things quite a bit sooner than later. Considering the chain, if it's a really nice chain, maybe it's $70 or something, but a really nice chain ring is like $200, $300 for a single chain ring, right? Could be anyway. So I like to be a little conservative there. So cleaning your chain, a couple of ways we can do it. This happens to be an old bed sheet that, well, it's no longer serving its purpose. So I've cut up a bed sheet into a whole bunch of squares. If you have towels, rags, old t-shirts, whatever, that's great. And then I have any number of spray bottles with cleaning solution. This happens to be a mildly diluted simple green. You can spray up your rag. And then what I like to do is grasp the chain not only from the sides and back pedal quite a bit, but also from the top. So I'm really covering both the top and bottom of the chain and getting as much stuff off as possible. You'll notice that you can do this for as long as you want, and you're still going to get black, greasy, dirt stuff coming off. Pick a time to stop at some point, and call it clean. So this is one way you can clean your chain, okay, with a rag. One problem I have with something like this, at least with this particular rag, in that I've cut it, so you'll see all these threads hanging off. Well, these can get caught in the chain, work their way into the drivetrain and into the derailleur pulleys in the back. So just got to be careful, grab in the middle as opposed to the end. Here's another tool. This is something from Finish Line. This is called the Brunch Brush. This is kind of neat in that it's got brushes top and bottom and on the side. So what you do is you spray this thing up with your cleaning solution, maybe some simple green, maybe something else. You jam it onto the chain, back pedal, and when I say jam it onto the chain, even with the rag, we're talking about the lower portion of the chain. Maybe it's time I move my computer so you can see. So give me just a minute here. We'll move this.
While you're moving it, Sam, we had a question is,
yeah.
How do you clean the greasy rags? Do you toss them in the washer? Or how do you, can they be cleaned, or should they be mixed in with other household items?
You know, I will typically throw them away. Most of the time, they cannot be cleaned. You know, most shops use an industrial service like Centos, and you'll put your dirty, sorry, you can't see my face now. You'll put the dirty rags just in a bin. They'll pick them up. They'll give you some new ones, and that's kind of how it goes. You know, hence using an old bed sheet or something like that. If there's a recycling service that you know locally, that's great. I know there are delivery rag services, but typically I'll use something that I might otherwise have thrown out. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. As far as cleaning chains and things go, though, I'll use something over and over until it's just covered in black crap. And I tend to wear gloves when I'm working, either nitrile gloves, or these are called Gorilla Grips. They're sort of like plastic dip coated on one side, and they kind of have some flexibility. These are nice, washable, so I'll wear these right now. How about that? So here's my chain, and a couple of ways we can go about it. So I've got my rag, I sprayed it up with my stuff, and I grab down here on the bottom, as opposed to this top portion leading from the top of the cassette to the chain rings. I like to go on the bottom because it's not under tension. When we were pedaling our bike along, this is from this distance from the top, or like tangentially from the top of the rear cogs to another tangential point on the chain rings. That's the only part of the chain that's ever under tension, right? When we're pedaling forward, this is all slack otherwise. And it can be slack because we have this excess chain being held up by this long cage with a spring on it, right? Taking all that stuff up. So more room down here as well. Another reason to stick your hand down here. So I'm just backpedaling, I'm squeezing on the top, now on the sides, and I'll just kind of go back and forth for a little while till it's clean. This chain is not terrible. So not the dirtiest example, you can't really see, but here's that other tool. So what I can do, spray this thing up. This is not the most effective tool. Not terrible. I have another one coming up that I like quite a bit, but I'll spray up the brushes, just kind of jam it on there and let it do its thing. It's these are rather stiff bristles, so they will pull out quite a bit of gunk. So that's pretty effective. It also has this brush on the back here that allows me to kind of jam it into the cassette and knock out any clumps of dirt or grease or anything like that. My favorite of these home tools, if you don't have a jewelry parts washer like I have in the other room, an ultrasonic tank, a heated tank up to like 150 or more degrees with the solvent in it. This is a phenomenal tool. It is from Park Tool. Many of you probably have this. It's called the Cyclone. I quite like it. Essentially, you will open the top. Got this little claspy top. There are a series of brushes and foam inside. You'll fill it up with some water and some concentrated cleaner. In this case, I like to use Simple Green. It's economical. It's easy enough to dispose of. And what you'll do is you'll clamp it on the bottom section of the chain here. Put the top piece on. There's a fill line you'll notice for liquid. I don't know how well you guys can see over there, but put this into place, and then so long as your chain is level, you won't have liquid spilling out of either side. I don't know if you can tell on the video, it probably looks like it's at an angle, but it's pretty level here. And I'll just backpedal quite a bit here. And you can do this until your heart's content. And if we look up closely, I don't know if you can tell, but let's take a look. You'll see quite a bit of soapy suds. Let's see here. Can we see it's kind of soapy? I don't know if you can tell, it's dripping on my computer, so that's cool. But good stuff. That is a really nice product. Next to having that, professional solvent tank, which you really have no business having unless you, run a jewelry business or something like that, or a bike shop. This product works really, really well. So after you've cleaned your chain, the next thing to do, dry it off. So this is where having a bunch of rags comes in handy. I'm just going to use that same rag I used to clean, only I'm going to use a segment that doesn't have any liquid cleaner on it. Grab a dry section, squeeze top and bottom. Same thing that I did before, only all I'm doing now is just removing the soap with the cleaner. And stop when you're satisfied, when you no longer see too much.
How often should the chain be cleaned is one question, and then can you dump the the liquid green or the green solution stuff just down a drain and all that? So 2 questions.
Okay, so I'll answer the second one first. Simple Green in household concentrations, you can dump right down the sink. Especially if you have like a work sink down near the laundry area or something like that, which is what I use. You can certainly put that down the sink, no problem. In really high concentrations, like industrial uses, maybe not, but it is green in that sense. So you can do that. Depends what you use as a solvent. There's some nasty chemicals out there, but I stick to Simple Green for that reason. What was the first question again? How often should you lube? Yeah, okay. So that, I get asked that a lot. I'm gonna stand up here. Kind of depends. Kind of really depends. Woo. Let's see if I can turn this up. Nope. Let's go back over here. So lubing the chain has everything to do with, how do I put this? Okay, let's say you have a bike ride that you do. Let's say you ride your bike twice a week and you do 30 miles each ride, and you do basically the same route. You don't ride in wet weather. You don't ride off-road. You ride similar amount of elevation, similar amount of power, that sort of thing. Then you might have a regular lubricant interval. But as soon as you start going into riding in wet weather, riding in really muddy conditions, I'll typically clean and or lube my chain after any ride like that. If it's a wet ride, muddy ride, especially if it's my mountain bike, I'll hose down and clean and lube the chain after every ride virtually. If you have regular, let's say you do I know a lot of you guys put in a lot of miles. Let's say you ride 100 miles a week. Let's say you ride 200 miles a week. Let's say you ride 300 miles a week. If you're riding 300 miles a week, I'm sure your chain's just going to start making noise, being squeaky, being a little bit irritating somewhere at the halfway through the week, 150 mile mark. I would say if you're riding a regular amount, 150 miles is not a terrible place to do it. I know for my road bike, I think where I take out in more or less pretty good conditions, despite it being a disc brake bike, I would say every 100 miles, 150. You know, the lube is cheap. Simple Green's cheap. You know, I already have a garage set up to do this, so it kind of depends on how convenient it is for you at home. More often the better. The question is, or where you can find a problem in doing it too often, cleaning and lubricating, is if you're not doing the cleaning portion. If you're just putting lube all over your chain, all you're asking is for dust and grime and stuff to make its way to your chain, get gunky. It's not actually lubricating. What you're really doing is creating like a magnet for crud. And you'll find, in fact, everything wears out quicker and it's noisy and all that stuff. So to answer the question, it depends. If you're riding a lot of hills, you know, your chains are going to wear out faster. Just putting that much more torque on there. If you're riding through muddy conditions, the friction of the small particles of dust, dirt, rock, glass, whatever it is, are going to wear your chain out faster. So cleaning that stuff off is going to benefit you. If you're riding in clean conditions, I'd say every 100 miles, 150 if you want to stretch it a little bit. You could clean it off every 50 miles if you want, but I think 100, 150 is very safe. So for some of you, that could be a single ride, or maybe bring a bottle of lube halfway into your ride if you want. I mean, you'll know when it's time. If your chain is squeaking and making noise, you're probably past time. So, you know, anywhere from 100, let's call it 200 miles if you want, to clean and lube your chain. That's how I do it. Plenty of people go longer. It's kind of like how much noise do you want to put up with, and how much, you know, potential shifting problems or maybe chains do you want to go through.
Okay.
What's your time worth, I guess?
Right. And it sounds like that addresses, Ross asked a question about how often, if you're using a trainer, and it's like, you know, even longer, you know, a couple hundred miles would probably be fine, and use your ear to hear if there's, you know, irregular or skipping or, you know, squeaks.
I would bet the trainer you could go more often. It depends on the resistance, really. Or excuse me, less often. You could go a longer interval. I would bet. I would just listen to it on the trainer. But yeah, several hundred miles probably. At maybe couple 300 plus miles is my guess. It would depend on the type of trainer. If it's dropping your bike onto like a magnetic style resistance, like a style thing, or a fluid trainer, I don't know, maybe take a little longer to lube than if it were you're just out and about, out in the real world bicycle. Yeah. If it's the style like a Wahoo or a Tax or something like that, where you remove your rear wheel and put your chain on the built-in cassette, you know, maybe longer. It would really depend on the resistance. Right? The torque and the friction of the moving parts and potential crud, dirt, silica, etc., are the things that are wearing out. So.
Okay. Right.
Okay, so let me get you in close for the lubing, because this everybody seems to do a little bit differently. At least my clients do. So see if I can get you pretty close in here. So it doesn't really matter, in my opinion, what kind of lube you use. I tend to have a wax lubricant. I find it's pretty good. There are ceramic lubricants. There are PTFE lubricants. There are any number of them. Wax is pretty good. I find it leaves a pretty good coating. You know, it's okay on the environment. None of these are great for the environment. There are some green lubricants, so to speak, green. There's even a product called Squirt Lube, which is an all wax, like maybe paraffin even, product. And you must clean your drivetrain completely with mineral spirits and denatured alcohol and on and on. It's kind of a giant pain in the butt. I've had clients with this product. I've forgotten that they told me they had this product, and I've cleaned and lubed their drivetrain just as a courtesy, and they freak out because now I need to pull everything off, go through this long drawn out cleaning process to put it on. I don't think it's really worth your time. Can maybe make your drivetrain last a little longer. Jury's out on that. I just like something along the lines of this one, Rock and Roll Gold, seems fine. It's affordable. It's $8 for a little bottle. You give it a shake. There's some wax on the bottom. This one, Dumont-Tech. This is a lighter one. So this one you put on a little more frequently, but it doesn't attract much gunk. I like that one pretty well. I've used T9 Bowie Shield. The one thing I'll say about lubes is this one, Tri-Flow. Many of you probably have this in your little toolkit at home. Some of you have probably put this on your chain as well. This is not an ideal chain lubricant. Just leaves behind a bunch of crud sometimes. It is really best suited for everywhere else. You might want a thin lubricant on a bicycle, but not your chain. It just doesn't do a great job of adhering to the outside of the chain and then dissipating when need be. It just kind of, it'll, it's not exactly a surfactant like WD-40, but it will displace crud. It's not my favorite for chains. You can use it in a pinch, but not ideal. So what we do, and the chain, just like say the wheel, just like, I mean, we could think of a number of analogies, but the chain and or a bicycle wheel only as good as each individual link, meaning we really need to get a drop of lube on every single link. And when I say on the link, the location, the thing I'm referring to, get you in close if I can, right in here on the top, that's the roller in there, the pin in the side, and the outside being the plate. We want to put the lube right there. And that's it. So I'm going to show you my technique. Try to get out of the way. What I do is I find, and this is important, if you have a disc brake bike, or even a rim brake bike, but if you have a disc brake bike in particular, you'll find that if you get any lubricant on your brake, you have now contaminated your brake. And your brake, in theory, will make a bunch of noise the next time you try to use it, among other things. So what you can do is take a clean rag, that's not clean, take a clean rag. There are even products used to cover your disc brake rotor for this very reason. But you do need the wheel in here in order to be able to clean the way I'm going to show you. You can take a rag and you can cover up your disc brake in the case of this bicycle, which has one. Okay, so I'm just covering this up nice and tidy so that there's no opportunity for lubricant to get on there and contaminate it. So I'll take my lube, I've shaken it up, it's all uniform now. And what I like to do is apply the lube to the chain at the cassette on top so that when the chain's coming around, it's opened up, it's sort of articulating and giving me all kinds of room and movement to put that lube in there and actually work it in on the way around. And it also allows me to rest my palm, in this case, on the dropout or maybe up here on the chainstay so that I have a steady hand. And I can, basically what I'm going to do is squeeze this and allow a steady stream of lube, not a drop. I just squeeze the darn thing, pedal somewhat quickly, and really soak the chain quite thoroughly. So here we go. Whoa. And hopefully you can see what's going on in there. I give it a good soaking and I make sure to make several rotations so that I know the entire chain is covered. And then after I've applied the lube, I'm just going to keep on backpedaling for a little bit, make sure it gets in there. Now, you can take a visual inspection. I can see that every link is covered, every link is wet. At this stage, what I could do is I could wait until the next time I go ride my bike to wipe off this excess lubricant. And this is an important step. You must wipe off the excess lube. You can't leave what we've done on the bike. This is what's going to attract dust and crud and gunk and wear things out quicker and make your chain dirty all over again. You only want the lubricant on the internal moving parts of the chain. It doesn't need to be on the exterior of the chain. It just needs to be on those rollers and pins that are actually making contact, the parts that are responsible for stretch, if you will. So what you could do is wait overnight if you're going to go ride the next day. Really let that lube soak in there, and then take your rag, grab it along the bottom and back pedal, top, bottom, side, side, until the rag is not as black or gunky as it was before. If you're forgetful and you're just going to go off and ride, just clean it. No big deal. I don't know if there's a huge benefit either way. So I'll take a dry portion of the rag, grab the bottom, and you'll notice some of the lube, especially with the method that I showed, has definitely gotten, on parts of the derailleur. Maybe there's some on the rim. In the case of a rim brake bike, you might find, oh, there's a little bit of lube on the braking surface, and that's definitely not good. So you will want to wipe that off. But this is the most thorough way to clean and lube your chain, in my opinion. So after you've wiped off lube anywhere else that it may have gotten, in the case of the disc brake, we'll take this off. Our disc brake is nice and clean, and we're ready to rock. So let me regroup here and see what's next. Any questions at this point?
No, I think we're good.
Sweet. All right. Geez, we just got to the chain. This is I think it could take a while.
People are asking questions, which is all good.
Hey, I like being thorough. I thought like maybe you gotta make an outline, but I figured this would take a while. So I like it this way. As far as your cassette goes, there are a number of ways you can clean it. You know what? Let's come back over here. This is important too. If you clean the chain, well, good for you. But what about the rest of the deal? There are a number of other components. So let's get these out of the way. To clean any gunk out from in between the gears on your cassette, and those are the rear cogs on your rear wheel, there are a number of tools that I like to use. If you go to the dentist, and like I imagine many of you do, you can get dental picks. They will just give them to you. You say, hey, you got any dental picks lying around? Of course, you can get these at Ace Hardware too. But this one's nice. I like a number of different shapes. This one's kind of got like a little spoon sort of a shape to it. This one's kind of interesting. Just your standard, I don't know, pick thing. Then of course, if you're a bike person who's got stuff lying around or an old wheel, hey, there's a spoke. I don't know, you probably won't get that side in between the gears unless you got an old bike, maybe you will. But you can stick the threaded part in there. And what you can do with that, let's get it in between, right? You can go ahead and fish in here, and this can be a little tedious, but if you have big chunks, go ahead and just flick them out of there, go scoop them out. That can be a real pain in the butt, and admittedly, the dirt does tend to, the larger chunks towards the end, when you actually go ride your bike, do tend to fly out. So a lot of the dirt that remains will be closer to the middle where it won't touch your chain, not a huge deal. But what you can do is clean the gunk off of the jockey wheels, these little wheels on your derailleur. What I like to do right in here, what I like to do is backpedal. You can see him turn as I'm backpedaling. And then I'll just jam one of these guys up against the side of it as I'm backpedaling, and you'll just see all kinds of gunk come off. Do note that some of it might fall right into your chain, so just knock it off, especially if it's been sitting there a while. It's probably a dry clump. But picks like these are great for the jockey wheels, for the cassette, and really just for scooping crud off of any place on your bicycle. Same up here. This bike hasn't been ridden in a while. It's just got like some kind of dust on it, so not a huge deal, nothing too gunky, but you can use these all over the place. There's also a product that a client told me about. I've yet to use just because I don't really need it, but it's essentially, it's called, what's it called? I think it's a Finish Line product again. I believe it's called Gear Floss. Comes in packs of 10 or 15, kind of looks like a puffy shoelace. So here's just a piece of yarn. This is probably a little bit too frayed to use. But what you can do with something like that, and the Gear Floss is really a pretty amazing product if you don't have a tank like I do. So you just take this stuff and you can stick it in between the gears and then just kind of and pop the crud out. It's pretty fantastic. This I wouldn't use because these little hairs are going to get stuck in there and then you're going to have all kinds of gunk. But yeah, if you want to write that one down, it's called Finish Line Gear Floss, and that's a pretty good product. I do quite like it. Let's see here. Jockey wheels, chain rings. I think that about covers that. Lubricating, etc. So if the takeaway from the lube portion of our show really ought to be clean it off after you lube, or you've done yourself a disservice. Additionally, don't just stack your lube. You must clean it before you apply some more lubricant. I have had clients come in who have told me, I lube my chain all the time. And then I see their bicycle here, and it looks like they've been riding in a swamp or something. I mean, everything's just muddy and caked on. They go, maybe I'm doing it too much. And I go, I don't know if you're doing it too much or not, but what you're not doing is cleaning it off first, let alone afterwards. So just keep that in mind. Okay, as far as the brake surfaces go, I'd like to talk about that next. And in this case, we'll talk about rim brakes because they're still out there, and I imagine many of you have rim brake bicycles. Let me get this one over here. So, just like we talked about with the lubricant, if some of that lube were to get onto this braking surface on your rim, that would impede your braking, could be in theory kind of dangerous. You would want to dry that off. Now, I don't know if you can tell, but you'll see some kind of dark streaks along the rim here. Might not be that obvious from here. I'm trying to move it in such a way that you can kind of see it. I might have cleaned this one sort of recently, but you can see these little chunks. And essentially what that is just your brake pad. It's just rubber that's embedded into the side of the rim, or some dirt that you picked up along the way. No big deal. You'll find after some time, these can get quite dark, caked on with rubber, and you'll find your braking performance is impeded. So the thing to do, maybe not so much at home, but this is something you can take note of and tell your technician about. Say, hey, there's a bunch of brake buildup and gunk on my rim. Can you stone my rims? This is assuming you have an aluminum rim or a steel rim with a machined surface. Can't do this to carbon. Don't need to anyway. Say, hey, can you stone my rims? This is a Mavic brand gomme abrasive. It's I can't speak French. It's basically got the consistency of a gummy, like a gummy bear or something like that, embedded with small diamond particles. So it's basically like a sandpaper, and you can use this to remove anything from the surface of your rim and basically make it shine like new and perform like new, which is nice. I don't think enough shops do this, frankly. It's a little labor intensive, does give you some good tendonitis, but gosh, it makes for a better bike riding experience. Okay, so there's that. This is not necessarily something you're going to do at home, something to take note of. You see a whole bunch of built up brake track, kind of black discoloration along your rim, or specifically if you're riding and you apply the brakes and it sounds almost like scraping, if it sounds like there's some kind of metal on metal or a rock or something like that, you can take a look at your brake track and say, hey, are there some gouges there? Go ahead and run your thumbnail up and down. And it should basically be just little ridges, no big gouges, no long, deep grooves or anything like that. If you do feel something like that, tell your technician, see if they can't clean it up, etc. If you hear noises like that, oftentimes what's happening is something that you've picked up on the road, or even your brake pads themselves have picked up the soft material from your rim that you're pushing up against. I'm going to show you my brake pads here. Just in here, they'll have, in here, they'll have picked up material from your rim, and that material is now embedded in the surface of the brake pad. And when you go to squeeze the brakes, you're now pushing that back into the rim and thus gouging it out. So one thing you can do if you have those picks that I was talking about is you can inspect the surface of the brake pads. And if you see little silvery flakes in your brake pad, you can take that pick and just kind of flick them out of there.
Hey Sam, Michael here. Just a question back to the braking surface, the rims. You mentioned that we shouldn't use that kind of big eraser that you had.
You can. I just don't imagine you'll have one.
Oh, okay.
You can try to find them. I don't know that Mavic even makes them anymore. I think they're all on eBay.
Okay.
You can use some light sandpaper if you wanted to.
Oh, sandpaper. Okay, because I use like isopropyl alcohol to remove any like brake pad and stuff on there, it evaporates very quickly. It seems pretty effective.
You can definitely do that if you have, especially if you have a carbon rim with a clear coat on it or something. You don't want to put any abrasive on there. If you have a buildup of material that isopropyl alcohol is not removing, then you can get something a bit more abrasive. And so long as you're not digging into the rim and wearing it out faster than your brake pads would, you can definitely remove that stuff and improve your braking performance.
Okay.
Those are new, but yeah, you could certainly use some isopropyl if it's actually taking anything off. Definitely. Yeah. So in the case of the brake pads, I find that these pads, these pink colored or salmon colored pads from a brand called Cool Stop, are very gentle on the rim. I find these do not pick up material. My rims last quite a bit longer with these. I've noticed with Shimano in particular, can't remember about SRAM, but Shimano in particular tend to pick up all kinds of metal. And you'll hear that kind of scraping sound when you're braking. It's a little disconcerting in my opinion. So just check those once in a while, or tell your technician, etc. Let's see here. Now inspecting your tires. This is important. Let's check this out. I'm just gonna, let's see, I might just maneuver a little bit here. Well, let's look at this tire right here. So several things to check on your tires. And now, actually, before I say anything else, why don't we go around and maybe people can say about how many miles they think they get out of their tires or how often they change their tires. This is different for everybody. You want to start, Michael? Yeah.
Go ahead.
It depends on the kind of tires. I use some lighter weight tires, somewhere 500 to 1,000 miles on the rear for the rear tire. Front tire lasts, many thousands.
Right.
Yeah, I have the same experience. I used to use the GP 4000s. Now I use the GP 5000s Continentals, which is pretty popular. And I find the rear, I have to replace between every 1,000 and 1,500. And the front might last twice or even 3 times.
Yeah.
I would say that's all exactly my experience personally and what I've seen from many hundreds of clients. Typically, the rear tire, 500 would be on the low side, so long as it didn't say catastrophically fail with a big slash in the sidewall that had nothing to do with typical wear. That would be like a race day type, lightweight, thin compound, that kind of thing. But yeah, personally, I'm on the heavier side, bigger side for a cyclist, and I'll wear through a rear tire. I got a good 1,500 miles actually, maybe 1,300 out of my last Continental high performance tire, which was pretty good. I don't wait until I start getting a bunch of flats. That's one indicator that you need a new tire. Plenty of people will just wait until they start getting a succession of flats. And I just tend to take a look at the profile of the tire.
That's exactly, yeah.
Looking right on it, right here. And you'll be, let's see if I can put something light behind here so we can look at that. You can see it a little better. So this being the front tire and this being a very hard wearing tire, this is a Schwalbe Marathon, a tire very well known for touring and just being extremely robust. Not exactly the best feeling tire, but super, super tough. So it will certainly hold up if you're out touring in Africa or something like that. You want to have something very reliable as far as not getting a puncture. But you can see it's nice and round on the top here. No big deal. I mean, typically when we're riding a road bike or really any bicycle, when the tire's starting to wear, whether it's full of cuts or not, you'll see that the top just starts to flatten off, square off, if you will. So not only does this mean that you're wearing through the tread and getting closer and closer to that inner tube and closer to the casing of the tire underneath the tread, meaning that you're more susceptible to punctures, but you also have less traction when you're turning the bike or when you're cornering. You don't have this nice surface, this nice contact all the way around. What you have is flat, and then when you when you turn to one side or the other, you'll have just essentially a little edge that you're riding on. So in theory, that rear tire could lose traction, spin out, something along those lines. But assuming your tire looks nice and round, just like this, let's say in the rear, being that that is the one that wears quicker, what you can do now and again is just go ahead and rotate it all the way around and take a look down at the top of the tread and see if you can't see anything sticking out of it, maybe a chunk of glass, maybe some slice, some cut. In this case, I don't really see anything. It might just be that this one doesn't have much going on or hasn't seen many miles. But let's see, let's take my personal tire here. I'll do an inspection with you here. Even if you were to see a number of cuts, might not be a problem. You know, just going to depend on how deep they are. So there, if you see, I don't know if we're going to be able to pick up this detail. I don't think we can. There's some tiny little cuts in here. I don't think you'll even be able to see them from there. And maybe that's a good indication that this tire is okay. Nothing too crazy here. I see little itty bitty holes that look like maybe running over some automotive glass. Nothing that looks like it's cut all the way down past the rubber and to the casing, essentially the woven component that that makes up the structure of the tire. So everything looks okay on this one. That said, people do tend to neglect those front tires because they last so long. Something to keep in mind, this is the tire that keeps you in control. This one does all the steering. So here's a giant misnomer that I've heard over the years. People say, I'm getting a new tire, so or I've worn through my rear tire, so what I want to do to save some money is take that rear tire, put it up front, put my front tire in the back, because that one's got plenty of tread. I'll wear through that one. Just like what we've talked about, you square it off the tire, and it's going to be much more, you're really going to be able to tell up front when you go to turn that you don't have the same traction, don't have the same safety. And if that tire is worn significantly, you do have more likelihood of getting a puncture. If you get a puncture up front, you can easily lose control of your bicycle. Getting one in back, not great, but not nearly as bad as having one up front. Because all of a sudden you're going to plow off the road or into a car or whatever it is. So when your rear tire wears out, put a new one back there. Don't swap them around. And if you have two used tires that you're putting on a bicycle, which can be fine, put the one that already has more wear on the back and assume that you'll need to replace it quicker than the front. Typically anywhere from 2 tires, maybe even 3 tires in the back before the front needs to get changed. That said, your tires can wear out, if you will, without even being ridden. If you leave them in direct exposure to sunlight, that can dry out the rubber, that cause it to crack, essentially not retain its initial stickiness, not retain its properties that the factory intended it to have. So it's not a terrible idea to replace your tires once in a while, even if you haven't ridden them in many, many years. If it's a bike that's from the 90s or something, or even 5 years old, that's just been sitting there, you know, if it's in a cool garage or something like that, probably fine. Put some air in them, see if they don't have some cracks along the side. If your bike's been sitting on its wheels and they've been deflated, you'll notice that when you go to put air in them, you'll see some cracks along the side here, and that's just the rubber cracking over time, just being in that flex position for a long time. So tires are not something I mess around with. If it looks even remotely unsafe, put a new one on there. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. The tire is your connection here from bicycle to road. So that's something I'm pretty vigilant about. So my tires look okay. But yeah, figure anywhere from 500 on the extreme. Oh, question there? Nope. Anywhere from 500 on the extreme side. If you are a powerful rider, if you lock up your brakes and they skid often, if you are riding on rougher terrain, whatever, sprinter, to maybe with the some really tough tires, you know, or depending on your riding style, where you ride really smooth roads, you can get a couple thousand easily. I mean, I've heard of tires up to 3,000. Sort of depends. One way to wear the tread out less quickly take some tire pressure out. Most people are still running too much pressure in their tires, especially on their road bikes. There's a great resource for this. It's Silca. If you're familiar with Silca, the long-standing pump manufacturer, Italian lightweight kind of plastic frame pumps that you've seen on many old race bikes from the 70s and 80s. They have they were bought out some years ago, some recent years, and they've kind of revamped what they do. And one of the resources they offer on their website is a tire pressure guide. Silca is spelled S-I-L-C-A. So you can go to their website and locate that tool and insert some data. It'll say, what's your weight? How big is the tire that you're running? So in millimeters or something like that. And what sort of terrain do you ride on? And then it will give you a range of tire pressures that you ought to use. And chances are it will be significantly lower than you think it ought to be, or than you've been riding anyway. Less pressure means less wear on the tires. Also better ride quality, and even more contact with the road. As you can imagine, let's say this tire was perfectly rigid. Question there?
No, I don't think so. No, someone, I think MJ just shared the calculator with everyone.
Okay. Okay.
While we have just a break here, we have about 8 minutes left, Sam. So why don't you just to pace yourself toward our conclusion?
Yeah, no problem. We didn't even get to flat fixes. My goodness. So let's say this tire can't deflect at all. Let's say it's just perfectly solid, made of wood or something like that. Well, we're making contact with this very, very small ridge of the tire, which is translating a whole lot of energy. Imagine someone stepping on your hand with a stiletto versus stepping on your hand with a boot. All that energy is going to be concentrated into that heel point as opposed to spread out across the surface area of a boot. Well, the same is true of a tire. So not only will you have more grip if this can be deflected, you'll have more contact with the ground, but you'll also be displacing that pressure and taking up those bumps. And the pneumatic tire is essentially suspension for the rider. So a little less pressure is not going to hammer anything sharp into the tire quite as easily, let alone hammer your body as you're riding down the road. So chances are you're riding with a little too much. And give that a look. So let's see here. I think the last thing regarding tires, for some of you that have very narrow, very minimal clearance on your kind of road racing bikes, you might notice that you've got some grooves worn in the chain stays or the seat stays or something like that, or even the fork from what are called spews, tire spews. They are, you won't see them on this tire because I've removed them. Let's see if we can see them here. Tire spews. Can you see that little thing right there? That little finger? Maybe if I can just describe them. They're those on automotive tires as well as bicycle tires. They're those little rubber fingers that stick out on the side. If you've ever wondered what those are, they're from the injection molding process. Essentially, if those things are sticking out and you have very little clearance on your bicycle, what can happen is when the tire comes around, this one has a lot of clearance, but let's say it's very close. When the tire comes around, that spew makes contact with the inside, can you see, with the inside of the fork in this case, and can actually wear through the paint, clear coat, even through the material, the steel, the carbon, the aluminum, whatever, can actually make a hole in your bicycle. When I've had to tell clients, hey, your bike's roasted, your tire spews literally cut your bike in half. So it's possible. So you'll notice on my tires, real nice and clean, just something you can do. All you have to do is get a nail clipper, clip, clip, clip. The nail clipper has the perfect contour to cut that stuff off the side of the tire. You can use a diagonal cutter as well if that's something you have in the garage, but everyone's got nail clippers, so I would use those. And as far as getting rid of or keeping flats to a minimum, this is something the old school racers used to do. You can wipe your tires. It's not something everybody likes to do, but as you're riding along, you go through a patch of gravel, or maybe you think you might have hit some automotive glass, especially if you're wearing gloves and you don't want to cut your hands. Riding along, just reach back there and just place your hand gently on the top of your tire. You can potentially knock anything off that would otherwise be continually pounded in with every rotation of the wheel. I think that's it for today. Any questions? That was kind of a lot in a short period of time.
Hey, Sam, if we wanted to become a customer of yours, how would we do that?
Oh boy. You can go to my website, goldiesgears.com. That has my phone number. You can email me at goldiesgears@gmail.com. Happy to work with you. GPC, baby. Thanks, Charlie. Any other questions about what we talked about today, or questions that you'd like, or something about presentation for next time, or you'd like covered?
Thank you.
We'll do disc brakes was a request, and we'll get to tires too. Tire repairs, right?
Yeah. And what about disc brakes specifically? Would people like to know?
Yeah. So that came in from MJ. What would you like to talk about disc brakes?
I want to know how to change my brakes. That's mostly it. I keep squeezing the brakes when the brake pads aren't in there, and it messes everything up. I have hydro disc brakes.
Okay. Sure. We can cover that. Definitely.
But this has been just outstanding presentation today. I really enjoy it. I definitely want to schedule another one for the second quarter. So sometime in early July, we'll be in touch about that. And and everyone, I put a link in there to get some feedback. So for topics, how this this event worked for you, 3 quick questions. Always good. Our next presentation is on the 5th, Monday, the 5th of April. Our own Don Dunscombe is going to talk about Zwift. And then at the end of the month, Robert Vogel arranged for Nate English to talk about coaching and what to ask for in a coach, and how to evaluate a coach, what to expect from a coach. So April looks like we have a great lineup as well. And then Sam, we'll come back to you in the second quarter. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, let's do it. And if you have any questions before then, feel free to contact me, phone, email, whatever. Gonna hop on that website.
Yep.
On your bike too, whatever you want.
All right.
Questions. So.
Yeah, no, I had very favorable experience working with you, so I can speak from experience.
Great.
Sure.
Thanks, Michael.
Yep. Excellent. And then MJ just put the link in there. Thank you.
Oh, great. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, yeah. So someone just asked, repeat the next dates for this class. We don't have one scheduled. I was talking about 2 upcoming events on the 5th and then late of April and later in April. So we don't have a date yet, but I'll work with Sam and we'll set one up. So keep your eye open for that. It'll be in the second quarter. We'll do these quarterly.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks so much, everyone. This was a great session. Much appreciated.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.